she carried her dead husband's shame alone, until a cowboy with kind eyes whispered, "Ride with me," and meant it.
Subscribe to Wild Sky Stories. Turn on the bell icon so you can do not miss any new video.
The bell above the door of Patterson's General Store had barely stopped ringing when Caleb Morrow heard the words that made his blood run cold. "I told you last week, Mrs. Holloway, and I'll tell you again. Your credit is no good here. Not anymore. Not after what your husband did to this town before he died." Caleb stood near the back of the store, his worn hands wrapped around a coil of rope he meant to purchase. He watched as the woman at the counter clutched a small bag of flour and a tin of beans to her chest like they were made of gold. Her dress was faded blue calico, patched at the elbows and hem, but clean. Her honey-brown hair was pinned up proper, though a few strands had escaped to frame a face that held more dignity than any woman should need to carry. "Please," she said, and her voice did not waver, though Caleb could see the slight tremble in her fingers. "I have $2. I know it's not enough for everything I need, but if you could just let you what?" Eugene Patterson crossed his arms over his considerable belly. "Let you walk out of here with goods you can't pay for. Like your husband walked out of here with money that wasn't his." A ripple of whispers moved through the other customers. Two women near the fabric bolts exchanged knowing glances. A man by the window shook his head slowly. Caleb felt something twist inside his chest. He had ridden into Copper Creek just 3 days ago, looking for work on one of the cattle ranches that sprawled across the valley. He did not know this woman. He did not know her dead husband, or what sins the man had supposedly committed against this dusty little town. But he knew shame when he saw it, and he knew courage too, the kind it took to stand tall when the world wanted you to bow. "My husband's debts are not mine to pay," the woman said quietly. "I've done nothing wrong." "Maybe so," Patterson shrugged, "but money's money, and your family owes this store plenty. Until that's settled, you can take your business elsewhere." She set the flour and beans down on the counter with careful precision, as if letting go of them too quickly might break something inside her. Then she turned and walked toward the door, her chin lifted, her eyes fixed straight ahead. She did not look at the whispering women. She did not acknowledge the staring men. Caleb moved before he could think better of it. He reached the door just as she pushed it open, the hot afternoon sun flooding in to frame her silhouette. He stepped out onto the wooden boardwalk beside her and saw her pause, her hand gripping the railing, as if she needed it to stay upright. "Ma'am," she turned, and for the first time, he saw her eyes clearly. They were gray, like storm clouds gathering over the mountains, and they held a grief so deep it made his heart ache. "I don't need pity," she said, her voice steady despite everything. Didn't offer any. Caleb removed his hat and held it against his chest. "I'm Caleb Morrow. I'm new in town, and I don't know much about whatever trouble follows your name. But I know that wasn't right, what happened in there." She studied him for a long moment, and he let her look. He was nothing special to see. A man of 34 years with sun-weathered skin, dark hair that needed cutting, and hands roughened by years of hard labor. But he had honest eyes, or so his mother had always told him before she passed. Maybe this woman could see that. "I'm Clara Holloway," she finally said. "And what happened in there has been happening for 8 months, ever since my husband died and left me with nothing but his name and his debts. That's a heavy load to carry alone. I don't have a choice." She released the railing and straightened her spine. "My daughter is waiting for me at home. I promised her I'd bring back food for supper. I don't know what I'm going to tell her now." Caleb looked back at the store, then at the dusty street, then at the woman before him. Somewhere deep inside, a voice that sounded like his father warned him not to get involved. Trouble followed trouble, the old man always said. But another voice, softer and warmer, his mother's voice, reminded him that kindness was never wasted. "How far is your place?" Clara's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why?" "Because I've got a horse, and I've got enough money to buy whatever you need." And if Patterson won't sell to you, well, he doesn't seem to have a problem taking my coin. I can't accept that. You can pay me back when you're able." He held up a hand before she could protest. "I mean it. I'm not looking for anything from you except maybe directions to a ranch that's hiring. I'm a cowboy, Mrs. Holloway. I work cattle, mend fences, break horses. That's all I know how to do. That's all I want to do." Clara was quiet for so long that Caleb began to think she would refuse. Then her shoulders dropped just slightly, and something in her face shifted. Not quite trust, but perhaps the beginning of it. "There's a ranch 2 miles east of my place, the Double Diamond. They lost 3 hands last month to a fever that swept through the bunkhouse. They're looking for workers. Then it seems our paths might cross again." He allowed himself a small smile. "Let me buy you those supplies, Mrs. Holloway, please." She looked at him, really looked at him, and he felt as if she was searching for something hidden beneath his skin. Whatever she found must have satisfied her, because she gave one small nod. Caleb went back into the store. He ignored the stares, ignored Patterson's raised eyebrows, and bought everything Clara had needed, plus a few things. Sugar, coffee, a small sack of peppermints that made him think of his own childhood. When he walked back outside, she was still there, waiting on the boardwalk with her hands clasped in front of her. "My horse is tied up down the street," he said, gesturing with his chin. "If you're willing, I could ride you home, save you the walk." Clara hesitated, and he understood. A widow accepting a ride from a strange man. The town gossips would have plenty to say about that. But then she looked at the supplies in his arms and thought of her daughter waiting at home, hungry and hopeful. And she made her decision. "Ride with me," Caleb said softly. And this time it was not a question but an invitation. To trust, to accept help, to take one small step away from the loneliness he could see weighing on her soul. "All right," Clara whispered. "All right." His horse was a sturdy buckskin named Dusty, patient and calm. Caleb helped Clara up into the saddle, then swung up behind her, the supplies secured in his saddlebags. The ride to her homestead was quiet at first, just the rhythm of hooves against the hard-packed earth and the endless blue sky stretching above them. But slowly, piece by piece, Clara began to talk. She told him about her husband, Thomas, who had been charming and careless in equal measure. She told him about the debts he had hidden from her, the money he had borrowed from half the town with promises he never kept. She told him about waking up one morning to find him cold and still beside her, his heart given out in the night, leaving her to face the wreckage alone. And she told him about her daughter, Lily, who was 7 years old and had her mother's gray eyes and her father's reckless smile. Lily, who still believed the world was good and kind, because Clara had worked every day to make it seem that way. By the time they reached the small cabin at the E of a dirt road, Caleb felt as if he had known Clara Holloway for years instead of hours. And when a little girl with tangled hair and bare feet came running out to meet them, shrieking with joy at the sight of her mother, he felt something crack open inside his chest, something he had kept locked away since his own family had been taken from him by illness and time. He stayed for supper that night. Clara made biscuits with the flour he had bought, and they ate beans and salt pork at a table that wobbled slightly on the uneven floor. Lily chattered endlessly about the rabbits she had seen in the meadow and the hawk that circled above the henhouse. And Clara smiled, really smiled, for the first time since Caleb had met her. When he rode away that evening, he looked back over his shoulder and saw Clara standing on the porch, her hand raised in farewell. The setting sun painted her in shades of gold and rose, and he carried that image with him all the way to the Double Diamond. The rancher, a gruff but fair man named Henry Dawson, hired him on the spot. Caleb moved into the bunkhouse with the other hands and threw himself into the work, grateful for the physical exhaustion that kept his mind from wandering too far toward a small cabin at the end of a dirt road, but he could not stay away for long. He found reasons to ride past Clara's homestead, checking fence lines, searching for strays, delivering messages that could easily have waited. Each time, she would come out to meet him, and they would talk while Lily played nearby. He learned the shape of Clara's laughter, rare but beautiful. He memorized the way she tucked that loose strand of hair behind her ear when she was thinking. He discovered that she had a love of poetry, that she read to Lily every night from a worn volume of verses that had belonged to her mother. And slowly, without meaning to, he fell in love. With her, it was not the wild, reckless love of youth. It was something deeper and more lasting. A love built on shared silences and small kindnesses, on knowing glances across a crowded room, on the way she trusted him with her burdens, and he trusted her with his. Weeks turned into months, and winter crept down from the mountains. One evening, Caleb arrived at Clara's cabin to find her sitting on the porch with tears streaming down her face. The town had finally acted on her husband's debts. They were going to take her home. Caleb sat beside her and took her hand in his. It was the first time he had touched her like that, and the feeling of her fingers laced through his made everything else fall away. "I'll pay it," he said. "You can't, it's too much. Everything you've earned is just money. It doesn't mean anything compared to you." He turned to face her, and in the lamplight spilling through the window, he could see the fear and the hope warring in her eyes. "Clara, I know this isn't proper. I know I should wait, should court you the way a lady deserves. But I'm not a fancy man with fine words. I'm just a cowboy who saw a woman being treated wrongly and couldn't walk away. And somewhere along the way, that woman became everything to me." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "Caleb, I love you," he said simply. "I love your strength and your grace and the way you would move heaven and earth for your daughter. I love the sound of your voice when you read poetry and the way you hum while you're cooking. I love all of it, Clara. All of you." She was crying again, but these tears were different, lighter somehow, as if they carried away some of the grief she had been holding for so long. "I swore I would never depend on another man," she whispered. "After Thomas, I swore I would stand on my own 2 feet or not stand at all. I'm not asking you to depend on me." Caleb squeezed her hand gently. "I'm asking you to let me walk beside you, to face whatever comes together instead of alone. I'm asking you to ride with me, Clara, not because you need me, but because maybe, just maybe, we need each other." She was quiet for a long moment, and he held his breath, waiting for the answer that would shape the rest of his life. Then Clara Holloway, widow, mother, survivor, leaned forward and kissed him. It was a soft kiss, tentative and sweet, but it held within it the promise of everything to come: laughter and hardship, joy and sorrow, a lifetime of mornings waking up beside each other and evenings watching the sun set over the mountains. When they pulled apart, Caleb rested his forehead against hers and let out a breath he had been holding for months. "Is that a yes?" he asked. Clara laughed, that rare, beautiful sound, and nodded. "That's a yes." They were married in the spring, in the little church at the edge of Copper Creek. The same townsfolk who had whispered and judged filled the pews to watch Clara walk down the aisle in a dress she had sewn herself, white cotton with blue ribbons at the waist. Lily carried wildflowers and scattered petals with joyful abandon, and Caleb, standing at the altar in his Sunday best, felt tears prick at his eyes as the woman he loved became his wife. Years later, when their children asked how they had met, Clara would smile at her husband and say, "Your father was the only person in the whole world who saw me when everyone else looked away." And Caleb would take her hand, just as he had taken it on that cold winter night on the porch, and add, "I asked your mother to ride with me, and she said yes." It was, they both agreed, the best decision either of them had ever made.